And it's simply because he doesn't want to accept that he has lost it and there is a problem, and address the problem instead of saying the boys and girls are being incited. If he was honest to himself and listened to the problems the young people are raising on behalf of the country, we will not be where we are.
Asiyefunzwa na mzazi wake, mnajua atafunzwa na nani? The police are trained to deal with criminals. They are not trained in parenting. So, if you surrender your children to the police, what do you expect?
It started as a small, negligible domestic brawl, but it is now quickly mutating to an embarrassing intercontinental ballistic mudballs war as exchanges between President William Ruto and his former deputy Ruto-Gachagua take a cross-Atlantic perspective. With launch pads ranging from Babadogo to Baltimore and Machakos to Massachusetts, the Ruto-Gachagua brawl is now becoming a sideline international show. So, where is it heading? We study each projectile in motion to ascertain the filth content of its payload. Another conversation started, or is it continued, not far from this desk? ODM Secretary General Edwin Sifuna kicked up a storm in former Prime Minister Raila Odinga's party by painting a picture of doubt and confusion over the informal working arrangement with President Ruto's Kenya Kwanza administration. Now, confusion and doubt is apparently a shared dilemma across the political landscape. We have that assessment. In our final words, Bonyo's bone picks a bone with the soccer administrators at the Football Kenya Federation for their dirty boardroom games. On Sam Sense, has Sense just been suspended for political sake or for politics' sake? It's a question. Jamila's memo contains an empowerment manual, complete with subsections on Harambes and handouts. On Kaikai's kicker, hearty congratulations to Oscar Sudi, Fatma Jaho and William Kamket, 3 MPs who are now picked as early warning champions. And on my take, earn the trust, why leaders have little choice on the currency of leadership. The news gang is here.
The critics may say I am wrong. The cynics may say I am lying. And the naysayers may even say I am mad. But what if they are wrong? And they are. Pause for a moment. What if I am an agent of destiny for the transformation of our nation, whose promise has been delayed for far too long? Pause. Reflect. Think. Give me a chance. And judge me fairly when the time comes.
Ladies and gentlemen on the show, those who are watching, welcome to the program tonight. The hashtag is NewsGang at Citizen TV Kenya. Also, you can send us a text. The number is 22422. What a week it has been. 1 week, we're not here. 1 week. Just 1 week. And see what happens. They're at it again, perhaps more fierce than before. And it would seem that this... If they thought that impeaching the former deputy president would have ended the woes, it seems to have escalated it further. And now it's not just one person and his former deputy, it's president versus many others. Obviously, this is not anything that's going to abate anytime soon, and it happens when they're in Kenya, it happens when they're across borders. Sam, let's just begin by understanding where this all began, perhaps more recently, because, you know, there's, of course, much more historical background in this case. But again, this ratcheted up after the Sabasaba protests, when we saw now the president speaking out in his own defense against the calls for his exit.
Indeed. A difficult season, it must be, for the president and, of course, those that are in government, because this continued clarion calls by different quarters, and especially from the opposition side, and also what has become repeated in very many social meetings or even events, if you have to talk about the recent marathon in Nairobi. I would imagine that for a politician of President William Ruto's stature, this is bothersome because it continues. And for sure, you've heard him that every opportunity he has come out to speak, despite spending a few days or hours to respond, he sounds like it's an irritant, for real. Because in that clip that he just played, where he's asking for everyone to pause, to reflect, to think, but more importantly, to give him a chance and judge him fairly when the right time comes, he comes off as a president who knows clearly well, too well, as per the Constitution, has a whole 5 years, which is the mandate that he got when he was elected in August 2022 and sworn in on the 13th of September 2022. So he believes that he has the 5 years to implement the manifesto, but also to manage the country in that office of the president, which is a fair expectation on his side. But at the same time, when you hear all these critics who are reflecting on what exactly has been going on in the country and the sort of speeches they have been issuing, when you look at opposition leaders like Martha Karua, who is saying that this illegitimate regime has to come to an end, I mean, there has not been any space left for any negotiation. If you had to listen to, I think, Ruto-Gachagua, who was saying that nobody is interested in stopping his own term. Everyone wants him to run his full first term. I would imagine that these are things that really bother the president. But at the same time, I find his speech pretty interesting when he's saying that the critics may say that I am wrong. The cynics may say I am lying, and the naysayers may even say that I am mad. But what if they are wrong? I don't know what led him there, but I have to say that the delivery of that statement is pretty powerful, and sounds like an appeal to the nation to really get back and take a moment and reflect on exactly where we are as a country. As to whether it persuades the audience, the target audience, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what those people that have been critical of the president, especially from the political side, what they have to say about this particular reaction. But obviously, everything that the president is facing is a political reaction to the politics of the country, which has been a key factor in influencing them. And I'm sure we'll be talking about that later on the effect this has had on the politics of the nation.
Yeah, and indeed, he cuts the picture of a man who is seemingly under siege with his back against the wall, because it's not just coming from, you know, one quarter, and it's not just coming from one person. It would seem this outfit that now calls itself United One Kenya Opposition, the salvos are coming from just about everywhere. And so the president also, with every moment he gets, with every public appearance he gets, he seems to be, you know, I don't want to call it fighting for his life, but you would understand, where he's constantly responding to you know, all of these attacks from him. And it's not just from the leaders, it is from those who are protesting out on the streets. It is from sentiments that you see and hear on social media, to the extent that you see him in this fight for legitimacy, a quest for a reminder of who he is and why he's here. I'd like us to listen to some of that defense where he says, you know, I'm all you've got. I'm the one. I'm here.
Hata saizi bado hawajaamini mimi ni rais, bado wanahangaika Mimi ndio niko hapa kwa sasa. Wajipange. Mimi ndio niko hapa.
So essentially he's saying, this is me, mimi ndio nimekalia hiki kiti. But not only that, he then takes it to their doorstep because, like we said, it is him versus the others. And this is what he's saying to those leaders. In fact, he made this statement on the 9th of July, right after the Sabasaba protests.
Watachukuliwa hatua ya sheria na wote watafungwa. Na wao viongozi wao, we are coming after you. You cannot sponsor violence in the Republic of Kenya and expect to go scot-free. This country will not be destroyed by a few people who are impatient and who want to have a change of government using unconstitutional means. It is not going to happen.
And again, that's proving the point that I was making earlier, is that at every event that he is at, regardless of whether it's a political one or not, this one was on the 9th of July. He was inspecting affordable housing projects in Kilimani. The one that we played at the start of the show was at the Nairobi Securities Exchange at the listing of an infrastructure bond to fund Talanta Sports Stadia. So you would find even the events that are completely unrelated to politics, it's every moment that the president gets, even though the audience might be completely different, you'd find he's speaking in his own defense. And you only have to wonder, you know, the mood in the office of the president, the mood at State House, the mood, you know, within the administration when they're constantly facing these barrage of attacks and constantly having to defend themselves and their legitimacy. Just less than, and all of this started earlier, so just about halfway through the first term.
Yeah, Yvonne, and one of the things that the president has said a few weeks back was, he said, so how do you want me to go? You keep saying Ruto must go, but where do you want me, how do you want me to go? And I think I want us to listen to something else he said at the event yesterday before we continue.
For sure, just like those who were there before me, my time will come and I will go. Just like those who were there before me did. But respectfully, sirs, madams, let me ask you. So, what are your reasons for this Ruto must go? I'm sure it's not because of the spelling of his name. Maybe because you don't agree with the ideas, the policies, and the plan he has for our nation, which is okay. But please, would you kindly favor us with your counter plan?
That bit of counter plan, he has spoken about it several times, that those who oppose him just want him to go, but what do they have to offer Kenyans? What is the plan, other than just saying you want him to go? And I remember there was criticism against those in the opposition. They said, all we want is to get President Ruto out, whether it's in 2027 after the during the elections. But then he says, so mpango ni upi once you ask me to go? And he has said this several times, and he tells you how much that for him is a big issue, because he keeps repeating it. Even he spoke yesterday in the event, and when you talk about how he says these things even in maybe when the audience is not maybe one that you would expect to say something like this for. This was at the Nairobi Securities Exchange yesterday. And Yvonne, I think there is something that is could be termed as a delivery gap in terms of what they promised Kenyans during the campaigns, what the plan was compared to what has been fulfilled 2.5, 3 years later. And then, of course, the issues with the Gen Zs, with the maandamanos that we saw, the issues to do with the disappearances, the issues to do with those who had been killed in maandamanos, or someone disappears and they're found dead. So all these issues are almost lumping together at this particular point, and they're all just coming up. They're all coming up in different platforms, whether it's a politician speaking, whether it's those in opposition, whether it's normal Kenyans, whether it's activists, whether it's those who seem to see that they're being treated unfairly. For instance, when they talk about anti-terrorism charges being brought against activists, when you hear organizations like the Law Society of Kenya come out and speak out against how these cases are being treated, how the high fines that are being given to those who have been taken to court and charged with the anti-terrorism laws, Yvonne, it raises questions about exactly, it actually kind of makes you start to realize that these are the issues that are annoying people, irritating people, making people speak out and talk about how they want this regime to change in the elections. Because Yvonne, one thing that President Ruto has going for him is that because he's incumbent, he's the president, he has certain structural advantages. He has the state machinery, he has visibility, he has the resources, which he didn't have in 2022, because at the time he was outside government. He was a deputy president who was on his own, and he managed to win the election. So this time he has all this going for him. But then there are some stumbling blocks, Yvonne, that are coming up. And one of them, you spoke about it, as his former deputy president, Ruto-Gachagua, who has come up with this Ruto must go chant. He has come up with this one-term chant, and he speaks about it every chance that he gets. In fact, it looks like he relishes having to speak out, especially when he speaks after the president has already spoken. Remember the day when he was leaving for the US, you've shown us a clip of when the president was speaking at Kilimani. Yeah. And I think 2 hours later, Ruto-Gachagua was at it, and he spoke quite visibly about what the president was saying, and he's been doing it in the US too. Yeah. Time difference notwithstanding. Yeah. So the president speaks, Ruto-Gachagua speaks in the middle of the night here, the next day we hear what he says. So it's like he relishes this, you know, sema na mina sema, mwaga na mina mwaga. And for me, Yvonne, I look at it in terms of, this is July 24th, 2025. Mm-hmm. Elections are in August 2027. If what we are seeing now, tutakuwaje by that time? We're already seeing campaigns, that's there for sure. Empowerment rallies, whatever it is, notwithstanding, we're already seeing campaigns. So where will we be in 2 years?
Yeah, and you know, just to illustrate your point about this back and forth, you know, when you have a president that's now reduced to making this statement, and then there is a response from the other end, and it feels like that tennis match that's just, you know, back and forth in a ping pong. I want us to listen to exactly what you were saying, Jamila, that former Deputy President Ruto-Gachagua now responds almost immediately to the president's statements of defense. I want us to listen to 112. He talks about what ails the president in his view.
And it's simply because he doesn't want to accept that he has lost it and there is a problem, and address the problem instead of saying the boys and girls are being incited. If he was honest to himself and listened to the problems the young people are raising on behalf of the country, we will not be where we are.
And there you are. Look, it's all of this real back and forth that takes place. I want to just, before we come to you, Jay, if we can just illustrate this a little more. Exactly what you were saying. The president says one thing. This was him speaking on Sunday, 1:14, when he talked about parenting. I want us to listen to that first. He made these remarks on Sunday in the morning at church. Watch.
Asiyefunzwa na mzazi wake, mnajua atafunzwa na nani? The police are trained to deal with criminals. They are not trained in parenting. So, if you surrender your children to the police, what do you expect? No, please.
And that very same day, just a few short hours later, this was former Deputy President Ruto-Gachagua responding to that statement by the president.
He's a very confused person, extremely confused. When the Gen Z's protest started in 2024, he stayed after another 4 weeks, he said it's for the foundation. Do you remember? The other day, he said it's a church. He said the church, you know, they are the ones who are inciting people, church leaders, nini. He went back again, he said it's the opposition. This Sunday, he said it's the parents. Yeah? He said it's poor parenting. William Ruto, please, can you make up your mind? What ails your country?
Jay.
I think Ruto-Gachagua is enjoying all this. And it has to be said that he mastered what irritates William Ruto, and he knows how to deliver it. And going by his remarks in the last 1 month, that as soon as the president speaks, then he goes after him, he definitely knows the kind of buttons that he presses, and William Ruto must speak. And in politics, sometimes we say there's no decency. And Ruto-Gachagua has got nothing to lose. And just like some had indicated earlier, this is the point where William Ruto needs to elevate the presidency. And I'm tempted to ask, where are the president's men? Because it seems like he's fighting this battle solo. This is the point that he needed his strong men in the political field to take the battle to Gachagua's doorstep. Unfortunately, they are not, or if they are, then they are yet to master the art of handling Ruto-Gachagua. Because like we rightfully mentioned at the beginning of the show, it was supposed to be an impeachment, then a quiet relocation to somewhere in Mathira. But he's not stopping yet. So the president is at a fix and at an ease. There are three things that are happening to him. One, that if he decides to listen to the mood of the nation and does what everybody expects him to do, then will he be considered a weaker president, that he has succumbed to all these forces? The politician that William Ruto is, I doubt that is a choice he can make. The other thing that he's facing is, if he continues in this trajectory, that is remains focused on what he wants to achieve, he remains on delivering what he says he promised Kenyans to deliver, does he appear out of touch? And what does that mean to his 2027 re-election bid? So he is in a place that what he said at the NSE, that the gentlemen and the women need to pause and reflect, I think that needs to be the first thing he does. All these people that he speaks after or he responds to have got nothing to lose. They will hold press conferences and political rallies as much as they want. We will view them as the opposition. Their role is to get into his skin, irritate him the much they want, and have him respond to them and forget his agenda. So what does he do? He needs to pause and reflect so that there is the presidency and William Ruto the president. And because they say this is not the time to politics, we want to chapa kazi and all that, let him chapa kazi. But also have his people. Dispatch them and give them that blank check and say, go after Ruto-Gachagua and everybody else who goes after myself and my presidency.
Yeah.
Because from the look of things, he does it alone and he comes out miserable. He comes out like he doesn't have any support. That sometimes you listen to him speak and you wonder, once he goes back to office, who are these Mark Toes and Cyrus Jirongos that sits with him?
Right.
Yeah? And Ezekiel Bargetuny that sits with him to advise him or just cheer him up after that.
Yeah.
Because I watched him speak at the floor of the stock market and I was a little bit disturbed.
Yeah.
Yes, he looked forlorn. He looked like he was begging Kenyans that please give me that chance. There's a better way of delivering that. But ultimately, if the trend has to continue, and they already know that Ruto-Gachagua and the rest of the political formations are not stopping, then he must also unleash his men and women with strategic focus on handling these people.
And, you know, it's not just Ruto-Gachagua that concerns the president. I mean, the president is concerned with just about everybody that has something to say about him and how he's conducting his affairs. Let's listen to what he talked about and somebody he referenced as a retiree. I'm sure you'll figure it out, because it seems like he's got salvos for everybody. So you get a response, you get a response, you get a response. Everybody gets a response, including the man he called a retiree.
I listened to one gentleman who retired the other day after working, I think, for 40, 50 years. And he wants to be president. And I listened to him say, Kenya is a failed state. And I asked myself, so for 40 years, You have been working in a failed state. So, you want to be president of a failed state? Really? You want us to entrust you to the leadership of a country you don't believe in?
The president is listening and watching every TV interview, every rally, every tweet or post that is put out. And I think, I don't know, you know, Linus, in this one statement, he just acknowledged perhaps, you know, the person who's the latest entrant to the political scene, and perhaps made him a worthy contender, at least in the eyes of his supporters to begin with, which is that you acknowledge that there is also this retiree whom, you know, we all know who he was referring to. But this is where we are with the president now. He's responding to everyone and everything.
Let me try and interpret the trend we are seeing. The first thing that has been painted out quite accurately around this table is the sense of siege that the president finds himself in. There is absolutely no doubt in the way he's reacting that he feels he's under a lot of pressure politically. That's the first thing. But secondly, is a strategy in the fight back. And a strategy that actually, in my view, recognizes the dangerous context of what the president is currently facing. The president is clearly so desperate to have an opponent with a name. And he is very concerned about running against a slogan, because it is dangerous to run against Ruto must go. That's why he desperately wants a candidate to that. Is it Maraga? Is it the tribalist? He calls Gachagua tribalist. He needs a body on it, because running against a slogan or running against a certain spirit and wave is way, way more dangerous than running against a named candidate, retiree who has worked for over 40 years. You know, and the president, in my view, desperately wants to create that opponent. And now. And I saw this in way back in 2002, 2001 actually, when the opposition coalition of NAK, that's National Alliance of Kenya, of Mwai Kibaki, Charity Ngilu, and Charity Ngilu, Omolo Kijana, and Mwai Kibaki, the three of them got together. And the then president, Moi, said, okay, but who is the candidate? Tell us, give us your leader. Because you want something so that you can define it and then decide how to fight it. And I think that's the despair the president is finding himself in right now. And why is he there? He's there because for the last 1 year, starting with the Gen Z protests of 2024, last year, there's just been this very heavy anti-Ruto sentiment, anti-President Ruto sentiment, which is not defined. And I saw some MPs, some of the opponents saying, oh, Kati, this president and, you know, they are even giving animals like a dog. Who would you vote for? You remember that opinion poll?
Yeah.
And the president, politically, to survive, you must walk out of that trench. If you stay in that trench, so that the campaign will be anyone but the president, it becomes a big problem. That's why he wants an opponent, a human breathing opponent that can be named. He has 2 names or 3 names, belongs to a certain party, so that he can fight that. He doesn't want to run against, especially, his own record.
Yeah, okay.
He shouldn't run against his own record. He desperately wants another opponent. That's why you see him asking for alternative plans, which is an unrealistic asking. It doesn't work that way in politics. We don't have opposition that comes in the middle of a term and say, this is our plan for education. Can we change what you're doing now? It doesn't work that way. So running against his record, running against a wave, running against a slogan. This is what the president is running away from. And you see the desperation, the determination to do this as soon as he can, to the point that the president is also missing the opportunity to maybe take an approach that works. What are these all reminders about being president? You don't need the reminders, just be president. You are president, they are not. So there is that clear divide. So it means then you shouldn't be fighting every soundbite.
Yeah.
Because you saw his speech there, was it yesterday at the NSC? He's very good. He's done very good at tracking sound bites, whether it's sound bites from the US or from some interviews that took place in our platform here. He's done very, very well. But is this helpful to him? I think he is missing the opportunity. There's one more observation that could as well be made, and I think, Jay, you had referred to it. It's looking extremely lonely. We saw him talk about his predecessors. His predecessors had clear and many lines of defense. I think this president is so directly exposed. He is at the front line. He is his own first line of defense. Unfortunately, that's how it's coming out. Yeah. You don't have voices, you don't have, even on the delivery front. How many ministers do we remember? Yeah?
I think Yvonne...
cabinet secretaries.
Yeah.
Politics is teamwork, and he knows it. He's been around, he's built an election winning outfit based on teams. Yeah. But government too. So is government. It has to be a team play. There's so much that goes on in government that it's humanly not possible to have President Ruto as the sole spokesman of his own government on every issue. He can't be the only one putting out all the fires. Yet, he's finding himself in a situation where he is the driver of the fire truck. Yeah. He's also carrying the water jerrycans. He's putting out the fires, and from KICC, I think, is it no NSC, blowing the whistle as well. And it's not, it's humanly not possible to function that way. That makes him really exposed. I think Sam and Jay had spoken about the vulnerabilities that he's showing. Yes, of course, he's increasingly vulnerable. And he's also shown a capacity for being irritated, which is a mistake again. He knows, and he did it. I mean, how was the last time with President Uhuru Kenyatta?
The roles reversed?
Yes, he wasn't. He was not particularly the easiest deputy president to have. He was difficult. Yeah. Deputy President William Ruto ran a campaign right across the 10 years of Uhuru Kenyatta. Was that irritating? Absolutely. Did Uhuru react the way he has reacted? No, he didn't. Because one of the things that Uhuru Kenyatta would have done was to push for impeachment. And of course, there were arguments that, Uhuru Kenyatta may not raise the numbers in Parliament to impeach William Ruto. But there's also the counter-argument. If you had William Ruto outside having been impeached, how would it have been? Yeah. Ruto-Gachagua, it seems to me, is paying President William Ruto in his own coin.
Yeah, and before we come to Jamila, it's just, what you were saying about him being an irritant, and they know it. And so they push and they push and they push. And the idea about framing, who the opponent is, and they're responding. I'd like us to listen to former Cabinet Secretary Dr. Fred Matiang'i.
People have names, say it is Fred Matiang'i and give the evidence for it. Because even that blanket and general condemnation is part of that laziness and that recklessness and escapist behavior, as it were. Be direct and say who it is who is doing that kind of thing.
And so it's calling his bluff, say who it is. And then on the other hand, you see Ruto-Gachagua, and I'd like us to listen to those two back to back. Ruto-Gachagua of DCP and Eugene Wamalwa of DAP. And it just shows you how they're drawing the president out with all of these debates back and forth?
Tumesema kila mtu aende atafute kura zake. Kila mtu asanye zake. Pale mwisho next year, hapo after Christmas, tuketi. Tuweke kura kwa meza, tupige hesabu, tuulizane nani atapeperusha bendera as one candidate only against William Ruto.
Hatujakaa ama kukubaliana mbeba bendera wa muungano wetu. Na hatuna haraka. Sisi sasa malengo yetu ni kuunganisha Wakenya, kuleta Wakenya pamoja na kutayarisha team ambayo itahakikisha Bwana Ruto anakuwa one term. Our focus is on uniting to liberate and restore our country. It's not on picking on a candidate prematurely. Sasa nataka niambie Wakenya kwa msiwe na wasiwasi, sababu hii inaweza kuwa ni njama ya wale walio serikalini, and we know how NIS works. Wanaanza speculation na ianze kutugawanya sisi.
Hawana haraka, you see? So they're playing all this ping pong games, and they're the ones who have nothing to lose. And you know, and the president is there. I wonder if, you know, just to add on to what you're saying, the president set himself up for the situation he finds himself in. The man spoke about everything, from vaccinating cows to you name it. So now what happens is, he's now the sole target of everything, to the extent that you can't say, you know, let's pick on this cabinet secretary for this policy that we did not agree with. And perhaps as leaders should, he owned everything, but to the extent that it almost looked like a one-man show, that means then that this vitriol and anger and frustration that people have then goes to that one man, because you said this, you said you'd give us diapers, you said we would vaccinate cows. So the entire failure falls on the one person who was then his own cheerleader and biggest spokesperson.
Yeah, and you expect the people around him to be able to also help him be able to deal with all these salvos from different quarters, but they're almost unable to, because what would they exactly say? Because when you listen to those around him speaking out, in my opinion, there's no variety in what they're saying. A lot of times you see them repeating the exact same thing that they said yesterday, the day after. You know, they say, okay, want the president to come back again for a second term because of his development record. Or they'll say the other leaders are Wakabila, they're tribalists. Or they'll come back and say, they'll talk about how, they'll start speaking, you know, things that actually, listening to them say it, hamtaki hata kurudia. We did on one of our shows, we upsounded a few of the things that are said in some of those meetings, the empowerment meetings, and they're not palatable. They're not something you want to listen to. You know, you expect Toto akisimama pale kumtetea, you tetea him on solid things, like amefanya hii, inflation imeshuka chini. You know, be very strategic and very specific and very particular about what you're saying, kujaribu kumsaidia kiongozi against all these salvos that are being thrown his way. And we had the opposition leaders there talk about how they're not going to name their candidate anytime soon. Of course, Ruto-Gachagua, speaking in the US, did say that he believes that yeye anafaa kuongoza, that he should be the flag bearer for the opposition. You know, we can't talk law here after he was impeached. Is he eligible to run or not in 2027, all that notwithstanding. I think for President Ruto, he'd rather have all of these opposition candidates speak out and say, mimi ndo nafaa, because we've had former Chief Justice Maraga saying that he thinks he's fit to rule. We've had former Minister Fred Matiang'i saying that he's the one who is fit to rule. We've had Kalonzo Musyoka also, he has expressed his interest in the past to run for president. So we have all these opposition leaders coming up and saying we all want to run. So wakiwa wengi hivyo, I think for the president it's okay, asema wacha wakwe wengi hivyo, wataamua vile kura zao zitagawanywa. But Yvonne, I think it is important that the president stops responding to all these guys. Because again, we talked about how this is just July 2025. Will he respond to them until August 2027? Kujaribu kujitetea? to each and every one of them, to everything that they say. I think it's a waste of time, and also kidogo Waswahili wanasema inaweza kuwa inapunguza hadhi ya ile afisi ya rais. You should be above all this. I want us to listen to Ruto-Gachagua speaking just before he left for the US about them wanting to remove the president, but through constitutional means, that is in the elections.
Mr. President, nobody wants to throw you. Nobody wants to overthrow your government. Nobody wants you out of power through unconstitutional means. Mr. President, I and the people we work with are on record. We want to remove you from State House through the ballot in 2027. Please relax. We want you to serve your one term. Nobody wants you out of government unconstitutionally. Nobody has any plan to overthrow your administration, Mr. President. The leaders in this country, and indeed 95% of the Kenyan population, want to humiliate you at the ballot. They all relish that moment.
And these matamshis will continue. They will continue. As we said, the former deputy president is relishing this fight. I'm sure he waits to hear what the president is going to say so he can respond to it. And I think it's about time that something has to shift. Something has to change because the president can't keep responding to everything that these guys say every single time he speaks. There needs to be a narrative. There needs to be structured conversation. There need to be structured responses to them so that it doesn't seem like he's alone when he has all these people around him who can actually be there helping him respond, especially when such programs like the empowerment program and how much it's been hyped, inaanza kumwagiwa maji. We did a story a couple of days back about how it's not really benefiting the people. And they're talking about how the amount of money they're getting is not really making any difference in their lives. And that's supposed to be one of those platforms that they're using to try and get to people. I think there really needs to be a real look of how things are being done.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a break now. When we come back, we have more to talk about, including what all of this is doing to the state of political parties. It would seem that there is quite a bit of confusion, and not just in one party. We'll take a look at that when we return here on NewsGang.
We had another meeting, and there was a proposal to have a team to review the implementation of this MOU. I have asked respectfully that I be left out of that team because I have already declared this MOU dead. I have already done so publicly. So there is no point. I'm not a mortician. There's no point of me going to go through a document that I've already declared dead.
Welcome back to NewsGang. That is ODM Secretary General Senator Edwin Sifuna speaking a few days ago in the studio. Look, there was a lot to talk about in that conversation, but primarily the thing that comes out is the discord within the party, a Secretary General making such a bold statement. This was just days after the party leader had another interview on NTV and spoke extensively about the support for the Kenya Kwanza administration. But then it's looking like there might be some voices of dissent. And interestingly, this coming during the year when ODM is marking 20 years and is perhaps, correct me, around this table now, the oldest party, second oldest party?
Second oldest.
After KANU.
Yep.
What a place they find themselves in.
Yvonne, unajua ulikuwa witness kwa hii interview, so you need to give us a lot of background info.
A lot of context. I think Senator Sifuna speaks very openly for himself and very articulately on what he feels are the issues there. And you can see the reaction that has caused, right, from various people within the party and outside of it. Agreeing with him, disagreeing with him. He's speaking in his own capacity. He's speaking as Secretary General of the party. But there is quite a bit of turmoil in this party following their decision to get into a working arrangement with the Kenya Kwanza administration. In fact, so bad is that situation that, according to Edwin Sifuna, this is what he calls confusion that the leadership has caused in the party.
I want to apologize to members of ODM today for all the confusion we as a leadership have caused, because it is very difficult now to discern the position of ODM on major issues. And that is the biggest sadness, because it should be easy. It should be easy. When a member of ODM proposes a bill saying, oh, we want to limit the rights under Article 37. What is ODM without Article 37? What is ODM without street protests? What is ODM? ODM is a movement that has been built on the strength of the people. So you cannot be the ones telling us today that, oh, you are sponsoring a bill to limit the rights under Article 37. We swore to this constitution. And that is where confusion comes in for people like me, because I now can no longer pronounce myself authoritatively on the position of a party when it comes to the rights under Article 37.
That's a strong statement coming from the Secretary General of a party, Sam.
Right, and towards the end, she's talking about what Esther Passaris is the Member of Parliament for Nairobi, she's a woman representative here, was doing with the Public Order Amendment Bill, which I understand that she has since decided to take it away. It was still a draft proposal. Is it? Proposed legislation at the draft stage. Eventually it would have gotten to the stages of enacting a bill within Parliament. But you have to trace this to where it started. Remember, in 2022, there's an election, clear majority in the Senate, not very clear majority in the National Assembly. In fact, Azimio had the majority members of Parliament, if you had to reflect on the judgment that came from the High Court early in the year. You see the steps that the president moved so quickly to make sure that he's able to get a majority in the National Assembly, and in the end ended up with the leader of majority as Kimani Ichung'wah. So let me just walk a journey, because back in January 2023, which is just a few months after the general election, you saw some members of Parliament from the Jubilee Party meeting up with Ruto-Gachagua, who was the deputy president then. The following month, which was in February 2023, those same members of Parliament went to State House to meet the Deputy President then, Ruto-Gachagua, and President William Ruto. Thereafter, you had the members of Parliament saying that they are sorry for the offences or for the sins they may have committed, so they are asking to be taken back home. Well, the home would appear to have been the Kenya Kwanza, working with the presidency, because previously, you know, Jubilee Party was the party of the president, Uhuru Kenyatta, at that time. But then around February 2023, the same month that the president was meeting Jubilee, he was also meeting members of the ODM party. Among them was Senator of Kisumu, Tom Ojenda, and I think there were Felix Jalango. There's another name, Odiwuor, yes. Yes, exactly. I think there was the member of Parliament for Bondo, there was the member of Parliament for Gem, and the member of Parliament for Suba South, Karoli Omondi. But then after that meeting, you recall there was a lot of hue and cry within the ranks of ODM. In fact, they went ahead to start a disciplinary process to discipline those particular members of Parliament, and thereafter the woman representative for Nairobi was actually also reprimanded. Do you know why? Because she voted in support of the finance bill of 2023. She was fined, I think, 250,000 shillings. I don't know that she paid. But so you can see the chronology of events. That was Feb, Tom Ojenda and team meeting the president. In March 2023, the ODM leader, Raila Odinga, calls for protests against the regime because of the measures they were implementing, but at the same time, for the appointment of a selection panel to pick new IBC commissioners. The troubles started then. Down in April, I think it was the 1st of April, the president calls for truce, cessation of hostilities, and in fact that happened, and said that he's ready for bipartisan talks. That never really took effect. Recall again in July of that year, shortly after Finance Bill, or now Finance Act 2023 was passed, they went back to the streets to protest against the same. At this time, those that had gone to State House to meet with the president, this is Jubilee members of Parliament, a section of ODM members of Parliament, they were looking at their colleagues in Azimio as, what's wrong with you guys? Don't you know what you have come here to do? Now, quickly, in 2024, we have a different game plan, a different war in June and July. It's about the Finance Bill of 2024. And the Gen Zs stand up against it. Azimio takes a back seat, but principally says that we agree with these protesters because these are bad proposals. That time, John Mbadi, who was the nominated member of Parliament, was with the Gen Z team. So as all that is happening, then you find that shortly after, there's the breach of Parliament, June 25th, and thereafter the president breaks, the cabinet brings on board some members from the ODM party, forms a broad-based government. So you can see, the ODM party was complaining that the president and his party is interfering with political party independence. In July, August 2024, he's volunteering members of his party to join government and go ahead and form the broad-based government. But what happened after broad-based government? Impeach Ruto-Gachagua. This is September, October 2024. So you can see what is happening to the political parties. They are shifting. Now, after the impeachment of Ruto-Gachagua, what is the next big thing? It is taking Raila to the African Union Commission as the chairperson of the commission. So while there, so everything is quiet. There's a court matter contesting that indeed Azimio is the majority. It's not Kenya Kwanza, but because we need peace, we need to win the seat. So everyone in Azimio is supporting Raila Odinga. But just before that, then you find there's a judgment that comes and says, indeed, the speaker was wrong in communicating that Kenya Kwanza is the majority party. He has to go back to the drawing board. And I remember at the time, leader of minority, Junet Mohammed, and the minority whip then and now.
It could well be majority, no?
Well, it looks like. Millie Odhiambo saying that this government is broad but not based. They were rejecting the subsequent ruling of Speaker Moses Wetangula. And remember, Moses Wetangula, the Speaker of the National Assembly, is indicted by the High Court that you cannot continue to be the leader of the Ford Kenya party and at the same time serve as the Speaker and chairperson of the Parliamentary Service Commission, which is an independent commission. So look at what is happening to the political parties. At this time, the Speaker has since ruled that indeed the Jubilee Party, under the stewardship of Sabina Chege, can actually be a parliamentary party with its own set of leadership. Then, after the AUC defeat of Raila Odinga, what happens? In quick succession, in March, UDA-ODM pact. So when this pact is signed, you had punished Tom Ojienda and company, actually expelled them from the party, made Esther Passaris to pay a fine of 250,000 shillings, and now you're here working with the government and signing an ODM-UDA pact. There's a lot of lack of political hygiene, such that you have Jubilee members who feel more UDA than UDA. You have UDA members who have since fallen out because they are sort of Gachagua orphans, allow me to use that name, now looking for a new home in DCP. You have ODM parties that had been expelled, but now look like they went ahead to prepare the way for these others. And now you have people that feel, no, we shouldn't have joined government in a pact, or rather ODM joining UDA in a pact. And that's where Sifuna comes in. So all this has disrupted the political parties to an extent that you do not know what party you're dealing with at the moment.
And thanks for tracing it to the original sin. And it's interesting, isn't it, that where we find ourselves now, where people can't define who they are, and you quibble over small things, and Jamila will come to you in a minute, over, so is this a broad-based government? No, this is an association, this is a working arrangement, it is not a coalition government. So now you see we're quibbling over all of these small issues. But it just reminds me and takes me back to the 7th of March 2022, when then Deputy President William Ruto spoke about it being a mongrel of a government system. If you would recall, he spoke about that at Chatham House in London, criticizing the then handshake between President Uhuru Kenyatta at the time and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. This would now possibly qualify as a mongrel whose bloodlines cannot be traced anymore. Jamila, irony, it's come back full circle. It's come back full circle. It hasn't even taken 3 years. 2022 March. Right? And here we are now.
You know, Yvonne, when I was reading a bit, and I don't know how this is related, but it said since 2010, since we got a new constitution, no president has run on the same party in the second term. Well, when they're trying to run for the second term, they've all changed from party or Kwanza. So it's not cast in stone where anyone will be by 2027. But then listening to what Sifuna was speaking about, the Secretary General of ODM, there's something I want us to hear about what he talked about this agreement, which is not what it is been painted out to be. Let's listen to Edwin Sifuna.
I warned that the problem with doing a formal MOU with UDA is that it didn't matter what the MOU said. The people from UDA, the government, William Ruto, is not interested in the details of the MOU. And that is why he gets upset when I remind him what the MOU said, you know. They wanted a document that they could then go and, run a PR campaign around and say, oh, tumeungana, we are together. That is not what this document says. This document does not establish a coalition agreement between ODM and UDA. But that's the impression they've been creating. They go out there and say, and I had warned that the PR disaster that was going to come from this was going to be something that was going to be very difficult to manage. Unfortunately, the foremost PR officer for the party is the SG. And that is where I'm saying there's difficulty that has come from this.
And I remember when he was speaking here, Yvonne, he said that the reason why they agreed to work with UDA was to avert the country collapsing as a state. But he was talking about how they'll continue with this association until 2022. But he said it's untenable as there has been a breach of agreement. Mm-hmm. But when he speaks, Yvonne, and he says there's nothing to see here, begs the question of is what he's saying different from what we've been shown in terms of you have ODM leaders of the party, including a former chairman, John Mbadi, in government as a CS Treasury. You have Ali Hassan Joho, who's also a CS. Yeah. You have Opiyo Wandayi, who was a leader in Parliament, also a CS. And then you have the members of Parliament from ODM right now, who we don't know where they stand in Parliament in terms of being official opposition. Wanaimba nyimbo za serikali, they're the ones who speak the loudest in Parliament when they're supporting the government, and they even stop parliamentary business to start bashing Gachagua and the opposition. Then is that what, because according to Sifuna, there isn't much on paper, but what we are seeing in reality seems to be much in terms of how those offices were gawanywa and what we are seeing. The fact that Raila Odinga is at events with William Ruto, the fact that tunaona wako pamoja, and the fact that it clearly looks like serikali ni yetu. Even the politics of East Ibon. Remember during the maandamanos ya kupinga serikali, nothing was happening in Nyanza. In fact, places like Kisumu, business was going on as usual. Hakuwa na maandamano, there was nothing compared to maybe in Central where maandamano yalikuwa yanaendelea, and Nairobi and Nakuru and places like that. So ODM to some extent iko kwa serikali, but how much of it iko kwa serikali? And after listening to Edwin Sifuna, it is clear that kuna mivutano kule ndani. And you've had other ODM members, long-term members like Siaya Governor James Orengo talk about how it's not a good idea to get into any sort of arrangement with the current government. The situation we are seeing notwithstanding, the issues to do with unkept promises, the economy, Gen Z protests, the disappearances, issues to do with the healthcare system, education. Help is broke. After all those years, you know, such things that people see and hear, and they think about why would you want to get into an arrangement with such a government where it seems like almost everything that they touch is not turning into gold.
It would seem, you know, the idea of how you identify a party, ODM was in 2023 out on the streets, during the protests, and then, of course, glaringly missing in 2024 and 2025. It would seem there is a battle for the soul of ODM, who they were, what the party is known for, what they stand for, which perhaps ideologically we've always said that parties, always seem to, there doesn't seem to be much difference. But at least ODM was known for being on the streets. In that interview, Raila Odinga said he doesn't see the need of going back to the streets because the streets, that approach has not yielded much change, and that, there's a different approach. There would be some who would say, well, that's a change of tune. Jay, does it seem like there is a fight, for the soul of this? The young ones on one hand saying one thing, the old ones who are saying, no, let's try this route, work with government and see how far that goes.
Indeed, there's a glaring confusion within ODM. And I think this is what, and allow me to use this word, might lead to an intergenerational issue within the party. Because when you listen to Edwin Watanya Sifuna speak, and you hear Raila Odinga speak, initially you might be tempted to think that Sifuna is speaking the language of Raila Odinga. But in other quarters, what Raila Odinga says is completely different from what Sifuna says. And Sifuna's interview coming about 3 days after Raila's interview, which I think in a political party's hierarchy should not have come in such quick succession, and a central management committee meeting that I think happened on Monday, and none of these issues were mentioned, and tells you that Sifuna needed some space to ventilate. That probably within the party, what we call the owners of the party are comfortable with the arrangement that is. And Sifuna is looking out for himself going forward. And why? Because as a young politician, although not very young, considering his age, he's really looking at what does the future hold for me in the grand scheme of things that is happening in the Kenyan political space. Because if I continue to hang with ODM, whose real ownership insists that they're in a working arrangement with Kenya Kwanza, then what does that mean for my political future? If elections were to be called today and his beloved ODM is stuck in this arrangement, what would be the odds that he would vie on that party ticket and garner votes and win a seat? So he has to look at all that. And that is why when he speaks, you tend to marry his quest for ODM to unshackle itself from this Kenya Kwanza debacle, and also look at the future and say, who are the next possible voters and what are their sentiments about this arrangement that we are in? So he has to take care of that by coming out forcefully and say, I, Edwin Sifuna, I am not for this. If I'm called for any discussion around this arrangement, I will not be party to it. So that it's out there, it is clear. Because he's securing his political future. Because as things stands, he is gravitating towards the people who are saying William Ruto has bungled everything and needs to go. And therefore, he will not be in the same ship with anybody who is saying that William Ruto deserves a second term. So he is carving out a niche for himself that if push come to shove, he says, I said it. I denied it 3 times. I was not party to it. So that he's without blemish. That is the first thing he's doing. 2, he's crying for help. That he's speaking for a number of young people. And if you look at the ODM party, there are a number of young people. Look at the Caleb Amisi. You look at the Anthony Kibagendi. You move to UDA. There's the Mohamed Jichopevu and all these people that are strategically avoiding to be seen with the original party formations and their leadership in the current space. Because any association, their political future remains uncertain. Because they'll be told, you hung out with the bad guys when we needed you. You did not come out and defended us when we needed it. So, selfishly so, he's crying out for help and putting out an alert there that maybe in the near future, we will abandon this ship. And that is why he's saying any discussion that revolves around UDA, ODM, count me out. Mimi siko, nimejiondoa. Any formation that gets William Ruto out of the office, I am with it. So he's just a politician that is carving out a future for himself, looking out for himself, and in as much as he insists that ODM, from where I sit as the Secretary General, has got no working arrangement with Kenya Kwanza or UDA as it were, we know the people who, when they speak, the ODM party has spoken.
Is he not now?
Yeah.
He's not anymore?
No, he speaks, and I'll say this with a lot of... He says what he has been approved to say.
Yeah, okay.
But there are people... There are people, because I can say it here, remember, when William Ruto disbanded his cabinet, the first person to come out and say ODM will work with UDA, whether people like it or not, was Dr. Oburu Oginga in the early days. And he stuck to it. And to date, he says they are sticking with William Ruto. And he's rarely challenged within the ranks of the party with such
What's
kind of
Oburu Odinga's position
in the party?
In the party?
He doesn't have an official position, but
He doesn't need one.
he doesn't need one.
Yeah.
But he speaks.
Yeah.
And when he speaks, party members listen.
Yeah.
So these are the confusions that Sifuna must confront, even as he comes out strongly and says ODM is not party. There are these other guys that when they speak the voice of the party. And it is known.
So, Alina says, as we close, what do you make of what's happening within ODM? But it's not just ODM, by the way. UDA, and hopefully in a minute or so, we'll listen to Ndindi Nyoro, who also himself, after his ouster as budget committee chair in the National Assembly, is also now the latter-day saint who sees all the ills that the government is doing. So it's ODM, but it's also on the other side. So it would seem that this working arrangement has had casualties on both sides.
Let me just go to the events in ODM first. And when you hear of owners of the party, the most unfortunate thing about party politics in this country is when you're told about owners of the party, we're actually making reference to tribe. Which is why I asked a simple question. What is the position of Oburu Odinga in ODM? The position of Odinga Oburu in ODM is, one, he is a Luo. Two, he is the brother of Raila Odinga. So somehow that gives him higher ownership status than the Secretary General of ODM, Edwin Sifuna. That's how sad the state of party politics in this country is. So that the weight of Oburu Odinga's position is entirely because of tribe and actually relationship to party leader. That is how it works. But let's say one thing that happened on the set that you were in charge of the other day, Yvonne. One thing that came out very clearly is Edwin Sifuna showcased himself as a conviction politician. And there are very, very clear circumstances to prove that. A lot of what is going on right now in our party politics is convenience. So you listen to Sifuna, the gentleman is still trying to fight for conviction, things that you believe in. Is this right or wrong? Is this correct or not correct? He is in that space. And number two, he is also looking at the political environment around in this country. I think there was to one of the questions that you asked, and he spoke of the removal of President Ruto as being the highest priority, because you can't give Albert Ojwang markets or roads or some dual carriage. Yeah. That is conviction politics. And in history, there are very few such politicians that stood out. And I want to refer you back to the 70s when there was only one party in this country called the Kenya African National Union, KANU Party. In the 70s, when Parliament was Parliament, it was very, very vibrant, one-way street. But in there was some conviction politicians, young, the age of Edwin Sifuna, and even younger, who stood out and said, no, we will correct this government. And they were nicknamed by, it was Charles Njonjo who nicknamed them Six Bearded Sisters. Bearded Sisters. Yeah. There was James Orengo, Machofi from the coast. There was Koigi Wamare. There was Chelagat Mutai, who was a lady from Nandi. Very, very brave people who spoke truth to power. Let's be fair, that is the space Edwin Sifuna is playing at right now. Conviction politics. That even in the face of all this convenience that goes on, he still chooses to say, can we stick to what is right and what is wrong? And that is why he is really struggled with this coalition thing. Even, do you remember the signing ceremony? he showed up, but he was a troubled soul. He knew he was in the wrong place. Something sinister is going on around this place. Not every fiber of his heart has agreed with what is going on, but he played respectfully. And I think the reason he played along is Raila Odinga. Raila Odinga also, partly, is a conviction politician. There's no way you can go to jail for 8 years if you're not standing for anything. He is a version, an older version of Edwin Sifuna. There were days he stood for one thing, and he could go to jail for it. But I think with time and age, he'll balance things. Yeah. And I want to go to why the balancing, which takes me back to the story of parties and tribes. Let's face it. Power politics in this country revolves largely around two communities. Two communities. That's the Kikuyu community and the Luo community, historically. And there are very, very historical facts around that. And that is back to the days of the Kenya African National Union formation, the Lancaster talks, the competition between the so-called big tribes. By the way, in the independence politics, these two communities were in the same pot. Mm-hmm. And everybody else was in another pot called KADU, Kenya African Democratic Union. Because of this is where the smaller communities were. And who are the leaders in those smaller communities? The Kalenjin, who are led by former President Daniel Arap Moi, who was then Minister for Home Affairs. Now, everyone troops to Kanu, and then within Kanu, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and Jomo Kenyatta to the lake and the mountain have the first major problem. Leading to the collapse of their union in 1966. I think, was it on this set that Martha Karua spoke about the 1969 oathing? Oathing, yeah. Where the community, swore that there'll be no transfer of power to certain communities. Now, those were the years that planted this politics of convenience, where convenience is a major strategy in winning political power. Now, that's why you notice, and I keep insisting on this theory of the three communities that somehow can't end up on the same table together. One has to step aside. And look, battle weary. I mean, ODM has fought so many battles trying to get to political power all the way from 2007, and always coming so close, so close, and so close. And then, how close was it the last time? In 2022? Sifuna told you he doesn't understand how they lost the election. That's very, very true, that ODM cannot possibly explain how they lost the presidential election in 2022. Then convenience kicks in. President Ruto is having trouble with his main ally, Ruto-Gachagua. And there comes an opportunity. And ODM, which in my view has been an expert party when it comes to giving political insurance, stepped in and big time to save President Ruto from further trouble. Because have you stopped to imagine if ODM is not working with Ruto and Gachagua is out? What do we have? Yeah, we have a bicycle, and will it reach the destination? We don't know. We just have instability. So ODM, with his comprehensive cover, came in. And Raila Odinga the other day confirmed he is in this till 2027. Yeah. So the cover expires. He hasn't indicated whether it expires in 2027 or it will be up for renewal in 2027. Yeah. So convenience kicks in, especially when people and parties and players lose hope with systems. And I'm just imagining if the country continued this way for another 10, 15 years, will Sifuna hold on? Or will he also now start doing what Raila Odinga has to do now. If you can't get power through the elections, then post-election, can you somehow come in, which is politics of convenience. So Sifuna, to his credit, and in his age, is playing conviction politics, but then the reality is completely different. And then the last thing I think Sifuna is struggling with is the obvious, visible, palpable loss of popularity for the Kenya Kwanza administration. And he's wondering, is it good, calculating, strategic politics to hang around with KK? You see, there's Ruto must go on the street, Ruto must go everywhere. Kenya Kwanza is facing all manner of problems. But what is the convenient side of the ODM politics saying? We've been there before. They've done it before. Last election, they carried the burden of incumbency on behalf of Uhuru Kenyatta. And William Ruto ran on the other side as the change candidate. What irony. That was the deputy president of that government. But that is how it's been working. And I think despair as well, and strategy maybe. You know, you will hear some saying, you know, we are in politics for power. So if there is a small gate at the back of the fence, then you can use that one as well. Yeah. And maybe they need to explain to Sifuna that one.
Maybe they do. Yeah. Who is they?
Wenye Chama.
Chama. All right, yeah. I mean, there's a lot happening. Like we said also on the other side, there's much to talk about it, I think, and analyze when it comes to that. Because there's also a bit of disgruntlement that is within UDA ranks as well, and within the wider Kenya Kwanza. So we shall wait and see how it goes. Jamila, it's time?
I think we will malize.
Sindio?
Seriously, I think it's been a while since you started the final word.
Most obliged.
Pokea.